need you to stay with me for this one, because I'm still shaking as I tell you this story. What I found didn't just destroy my marriage. It told me my sister didn't just die. She was taken. Now, Simone. Thank you for being here for every second of this one. In the last year of her life, Simone changed in ways I attributed entirely to a difficult period she was going through. She became more guarded. She canceled plans more than usual. When we were together, she was present and warm, my Simone fully. But there were moments when she would go quiet mid-conversation, like something had pulled her attention inward. Once when I reached over and touched her hand across a restaurant table in Little 5 Points, she flinched. Actually flinched. Then laughed it off and said she was just jumpy from too much coffee. I should have pushed harder. I know that now. Drop your location and local time in the comments right now. I want to know who's up with me for this one. The last real conversation I had with my sister, not the last time we spoke, but the last time we really talked, was about 6 weeks before she died. We were walking through Piedmont Park on a Saturday afternoon in early March, the kind of Atlanta day where the sun is out, but the air still has winter in it. Simone had been quiet for most of the walk. Then she stopped on the path and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was the look of someone trying to decide how much to say.
Childwin,
she said. She always called me Chill short for nothing, just a name she made up for me when she was 4 years old.
If anything ever happened to me, you would look into it, right? You wouldn't just accept whatever somebody told you.
If you're new here, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because trust me, you are going to want to hear every single second of this story. I stopped walking. Simone, what are you talking about? She looked away toward the park's tree line.
I'm just saying. You're good at finding things people hide. Promise me you'd use that.
I told her nothing was going to happen to her. I told her she was being dramatic. I squeezed her hand and steered us toward the coffee cart near the fountain and changed the subject because I was uncomfortable and didn't know what she was trying to tell me. She let me change the subject. But to understand what was on that phone, you need to understand who I was before that night. So let me take you back. She smiled. We drank our coffees. 6 weeks later, she was gone. For 18 months after Simone's death, I replayed that conversation in Piedmont Park so many times, it became like a groove worn into the floor of my mind. I always concluded the same thing: she had been going through something emotionally, perhaps depression, perhaps anxiety, and I had failed to notice. I carried that guilt like a stone in my chest every single day. It never once occurred to me that she had been trying to warn me, specifically, about something specific. About someone I came home to every night. People always ask me how I ended up in forensic accounting, and I always give them the short answer: I like puzzles. I like finding the thing that doesn't belong. I like that moment when a number that seemed innocent suddenly tells you everything you needed to know. He didn't cry at her funeral. Not one tear. I told myself he was being strong for me. But grief doesn't look like relief. And I know that now. 18 months after Simone died, my mother called and asked if I could help clear out the last of her storage unit. Simone had rented a small unit in Decatur, mostly old design equipment, portfolio boards, boxes of client files she'd held onto for tax purposes. My mother had been paying the monthly fee because she couldn't bring herself to go through it alone, and she still couldn't. She asked if I would do it for her. I said yes without hesitating. The long answer is my father. It was October. 18 months of grief had softened from sharp to chronic, the kind of pain that doesn't announce itself anymore, just lives quietly inside your chest and occasionally squeezes without warning. I spent a Saturday morning at that storage unit going through Simone's things methodically. Design books, old sketch pads, a box of client contracts going back to 2015, a milk crate full of external hard drives she used for client work. I labeled everything donate, keep, discard the way I approach everything, organized and systematic. At the very bottom of a cardboard box, underneath a stack of design annuals and an old college sweatshirt, I found a book, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. A book I knew Simone loved, had read multiple times. I picked it up to set it in the keep pile. A small USB drive fell out from between the pages. It was taped to the inside back cover with a strip of clear tape that had yellowed slightly at the edges. Bernard Carter was a self-made man, built a mid-size logistics consulting firm from nothing in the 90s, right here in Atlanta. He used to say, it had been there a while, deliberately placed, hidden in plain sight inside the book she loved most. I stood in that storage unit holding it for a long time. Then I put it in my pocket and drove home. That same week, Dominic got a new phone, an upgrade from his company. He handed me his old one and asked me to set up the new device for him, transfer his contacts, help him get his apps configured. It was the kind of domestic task we'd divided without discussion over 11 years. I was better with technology, so tech things came to me. I was setting up the Face ID on the new phone following the prompts when I noticed something on his old device. I had pulled up the settings to check which apps needed to be transferred manually, and I saw it listed under biometric security, 2 faces registered.
Hey, Camille, money doesn't lie. People lie, but money always tells the truth eventually.
2. Most people register 1. Occasionally, a spouse will register their own face as a backup on a partner's phone. It's not uncommon. I had done it on my own phone for Dominic years ago in case of emergency. But I was the only person who should have been registered on Dominic's phone. We had set it up together when he got the previous model. I remembered the day sitting on the couch, Sunday afternoon football on in the background. I didn't say anything. I kept my face neutral and finished the transfer. I was 12 years old when he first said that to me, sitting at the kitchen table while he reviewed his quarterly reports. I didn't fully understand it then. I understand it now more than I ever wanted to. That night, after Dominic fell asleep, I got out of bed quietly, retrieved his old phone from the drawer where I'd placed it, took it into the bathroom and locked the door, turned on the faucet so there was ambient sound, held the phone at face level. The screen lit up green, unlocked. My reflection in the bathroom mirror caught my eye at the same moment, and for one terrible, disorienting second, I understood why it had opened. I have my mother's eyes, my father's cheekbones, and so did Simone. I grew up in Cascade Heights, southwest Atlanta, one of those neighborhoods where black excellence wasn't an exception, it was the expectation. Doctors on one side of the street, attorneys on the other, engineers at the end of the cul-de-sac. My mother, Diane, was an elementary school principal. My father built his business. And they raised 2 daughters who were supposed to carry all of that forward. We looked more alike than most sisters do. Enough alike that a facial recognition algorithm trained on her face might accept mine in certain lighting conditions. But that wasn't why it unlocked. Because I tested it. I covered the top half of my face. I tilted my head. The phone stayed locked. It was not accepting my face as an approximation of my own. It was recognizing a face that had been specifically enrolled. My sister's face had been programmed into my husband's phone. My name is Camille Renee Okafor. I'm 38 years old. I'm a forensic accountant in Atlanta, Georgia, meaning I find financial fraud for a living. I spend my days following money trails, exposing hidden accounts, catching liars. Me Camille Renee and my sister Simone. My sister, who had been dead for 18 months. Which meant at some point before she died, Dominic had held his phone up to Simone's face and registered her biometrics. Deliberately. Without her knowing or with her knowing. Either possibility was unbearable. I sat down on the bathroom floor back against the tub, and I stayed there for a long time. The next morning, I said nothing. I made coffee. I asked Dominic about his week. I acted like every molecule of my body was not vibrating with something I could not yet name. Simone Renee Carter, 2 years younger than me, different last name because she took our mother's maiden name after our parents divorced when she was 9, but she was mine in every way that mattered. My best friend before I even knew what a best friend was. The person I called first for everything. When I got promoted, I called Simone. When I had a bad day, I called Simone. When I needed someone to tell me the truth when I didn't want to hear it, Simone. That evening, I brought it up carefully. I told him I'd noticed the 2 face IDs registered on his old phone while doing the transfer. I kept my voice light, curious, not accusatory. Just asking. Dominic looked up from his dinner and smiled. Patient. Unbothered.
Oh, that. Yeah, I set that up a while back. The phone had a glitch where it kept losing my Face ID after updates, so I registered a second profile as a backup. It's just a generic profile, not a real face.
She was a graphic designer freelance, worked out of a little studio apartment in East Atlanta Village. Creative in a way I never was. She could look at something broken and see what it was supposed to be. She laughed with her whole body. She made friends with strangers in grocery store checkout lines. She was the kind of person who made every room feel warmer just by walking into it.
Tech workaround.
He shrugged and went back to his food.
You want more rice?
I said no thank you. I ate the rest of my dinner. I watched him pour himself more water. I thought about how smoothly that came out of his mouth. 2 days later, I raised it again. This time, I told him I had tested the phone, that it had unlocked when I held it up to my face, that the only reason it would do that is if someone with similar features to me had been enrolled. She died on a Tuesday morning in April 2022. Her car went off Moreland Avenue in the early morning hours. The police report said she lost control on a wet road, ruled an accident. No other vehicles involved. Someone like Simone. The temperature in the room changed. Not dramatically, but I felt it a subtle drop like when a cloud passes over the sun. Dominic set down his fork slowly. He looked at me across the table with an expression I had not seen before. Not anger, not guilt. Something more careful than either of those.
Camille, baby, listen to yourself.
I didn't sleep properly for 4 months after that.
You think I what? Secretly registered your dead sister's face on my phone. Why would I do that? What would be the point?
He shook his head slowly.
You have been struggling since Simone passed. I have watched you struggle, and I have been patient. But this is not healthy. You are finding conspiracies in technology settings because you cannot accept that she is gone.
He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. But I'm getting ahead of myself because before April 2022, before any of this, there was Dominic.
I think you need to talk to someone, a professional, because I love you and I'm worried about you.
And here is the most shameful thing I will tell you in this entire story. For approximately 48 hours after that conversation, I almost believed him. I almost made a therapy appointment. I almost convinced myself that grief had fractured something in my perception of reality. Almost. But I still had the USB drive in the inside pocket of my work bag. And I had a colleague named Marcus Webb who knew someone who could crack encrypted drives. He said I was obsessed with my dead sister. I met Dominic Ashton Okafor at the worst possible moment of my life, which I now understand was not a coincidence. Maybe he was right, because I was about to find out he was obsessed with her too, just in a way I never could have imagined. I gave the USB drive to Marcus on a Monday morning in early November. I told him everything, the Face ID, the ring that disappeared Simone's words in Piedmont Park, Dominic's too smooth explanation at the dinner table. I sat across from him in his office with the door closed, and I laid it all out like a case file, because that was the only way I knew how to hold it together. If I treated it like evidence instead of my life, I could keep my voice steady. Marcus listened without interrupting. That was one of the things I valued most about him. He never rushed to fill silence with his own noise. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment.
Who do you trust to crack the encryption?
My father passed away from a heart attack in November 2011. I was 27 years old. The funeral was held at Cascade Hills Baptist Church, and the reception afterward was at our family home. Over 100 people came through that house. Friends of my father's business associates, church members, neighbors. I said I didn't know anyone personally.
I do.
He said.
A former IT forensics specialist named Dion who now works private contracts. Trustworthy, discreet, thorough. I'll handle the handoff personally and keep your name out of it.
I slid the USB across his desk. He picked it up, looked at it for a second, and said,
Camille, whatever's on here, are you sure you're ready?
I told him I was. And somewhere in the middle of that grief-blurred afternoon, a man I had never met handed me a glass of water and said, I was lying, but I said it anyway. The drive would take time. Dion estimated 2 weeks minimum depending on the encryption level. So I went home every evening, made dinner, asked about Dominic's day, listened to him talk about a new client in Memphis, a deal in Charlotte. He was working a team restructuring at Meridian that had him traveling again the following week. I smiled. I passed the bread.
You look like you haven't sat down in 3 days.
I refilled his glass, and I watched him. Not obviously I had 11 years of practice reading the room around Dominic Okafor. I knew his rhythms. I knew when he was relaxed versus performing relaxed. And what I noticed in those 2 weeks of waiting was that something in him had shifted since our dinner table conversation. He was watching me back. It was subtle. The way he'd glance at my phone when I set it down on the counter. The way he started coming home at irregular times, sometimes early, sometimes late, with explanations that were always perfectly reasonable and somehow always slightly different from what he'd said in the morning. And I never once thought to look at my own husband. I looked up. He was tall, 6'2" at least, with the kind of face that looked like it had been arranged very carefully to appear trustworthy. Dark eyes, easy smile. He introduced himself as a business associate of the Harmon family who had been partners with my father. His name was Dominic Okafor. The way he started asking casually which colleagues I'd had lunch with, whether I'd spoken to my mother recently, whether Marcus and I had been working on anything interesting. That last one he asked twice in 1 week. Different evenings, different framings. Like he was testing whether my answer would change. I kept my answers consistent and unremarkable. Old case follow-up. Nothing new. Marcus was fine, same as always. He didn't try to talk too much at the funeral. He just made sure I had water. That was it. Then came the incident that made my blood run cold in a way none of the rest of it had. I was in a quarterly review meeting at Wells and Harmon, 8 people around the conference table, including my direct supervisor, Gerald Harmon himself. Midway through the meeting, Gerald paused the agenda and looked at me with an expression I didn't immediately understand. Careful. Considerate. Like he was choosing words. Camille, he said, I want you to know, and I mean this with nothing but respect and genuine concern, that if you ever need to take some personal time, my door is open. No questions asked. He called 3 weeks later, said he wanted to pay his respects properly, asked if he could take me to dinner. I said yes because I was lonely and exhausted, and he had kind eyes. Grief has its own timeline, and there's no shame in that. I looked at him. I appreciate that, Gerald. Is there something specific that's prompted this? A beat of silence. Dominic called me last week. He said he's been worried about you, that you've been having a hard time processing your sister's loss, and it's been affecting your sleep, your focus. He just wanted to make sure you had support at work. Gerald leaned forward slightly. He sounded genuinely concerned. We dated for 2 years. He was attentive in a way I had never experienced, remembered everything I said, showed up exactly when I needed him, to made me feel like the most important person in whatever room we were standing in. My mother liked him. My colleagues at Wells and Harmon Financial liked him. The room was still going on around me. Someone was pulling up a spreadsheet. Someone else was refilling their coffee. But inside my chest, everything went very quiet. Dominic had called my supervisor, without telling me, had described me as struggling, unfocused, grief-impaired to the man who controlled my career trajectory, had framed it as concern, had built a narrative brick by careful brick that positioned me as a woman whose judgment could not be trusted. I thanked Gerald for his care. I finished the meeting. I went to the bathroom afterward and stood at the sink with the water running, looking at my own face in the mirror. This was not a man defending himself. Simone. Well, Simone took longer. She was polite, always polite, but there was a reservation in her eyes when she looked at him that I chalked up to her being protective of me after losing our father. This was a man going on offense. That evening, Dominic came home with flowers. Tulips, my favorite. He set them on the kitchen counter, came up behind me while I was chopping vegetables, wrapped his arms around me, and pressed his face into my neck.
Rough day,
he murmured. Long day, I said. Nothing unusual. He kissed my cheek and went to change clothes. Looking back now, I understand it was something else entirely. I stood at the cutting board and kept chopping. Steady hands. Steady breathing. Later, while we were eating, he looked up from his plate and said with a small smile, like he was reminiscing, like it was gentle,
You know what I think about sometimes? I think about how lost you'd be without this. Without us. Without the structure we've built together.
He gestured vaguely at the house, the table, the life around us.
Some people aren't built for being alone, and there's no shame in that.
We married in June 2013 at a venue in Piedmont Park. 180 guests, white flowers everywhere.
You're one of them, baby. You need stability. You've always needed someone to hold things together with you.
I nodded. I said, "You might be right." And then, because I could not stop myself, because something in me needed him to reveal himself, just one more inch, I said quietly, "I miss Simone on days like this." His fork paused for just a fraction of a second, then continued. "Dominic cried at the altar, and I thought, this man loves me so much he can't hold it together."
She's gone, Camille. His voice was soft, almost tender. The sooner you accept that and move on, the better for both of us.
I looked at him across the table. His eyes were calm, perfectly calm. The eyes of a man with nothing on his conscience because he had made a decision long ago to have no conscience at all. I said, "You're right." I held that image in my heart for years. I held it even when things got harder. I held it until I couldn't anymore. I know. I picked up my fork. I finished my dinner. And 2 days later, Marcus called me from a number I didn't recognize and said 4 words.
Dayon cracked the drive.
The files on that drive didn't show me what I feared. They showed me something so much worse. Because Simone wasn't his lover. She was his hostage. Marcus sent the files to a secure encrypted folder he'd set up specifically for this. For the first several years, our life looked exactly like what we had built it to look like. We bought a 3,000 square foot house in Buckhead. 4 bedrooms, hardwood floors throughout a kitchen. I had designed myself. I opened them on my laptop in the parking garage of our office building, engine running, doors locked, because I could not be inside the building when I read them, and I could not be at home. I needed to be nowhere suspended between 2 worlds, because some part of me already knew that whatever was in those files was going to divide my life into before and after. There were 43 files total, screenshots mostly. Some were photographs of handwritten notes. A few were scanned documents. And there was one audio file, 47 seconds long, that I would listen to last and that I have not been able to forget since. I opened the screenshots first. They were text message conversations between Simone and Dominic. It was 2 a.m. on a Wednesday in late October when I picked up Dominic's phone off the nightstand. The screen had been lighting up for the 3rd time in an hour. I just wanted to turn it face down so I could sleep. Dominic was climbing at Meridian Global Logistics VP of Business Development by year 4 of our marriage. I made partner track at Wells and Harmon. We had 2 good incomes, a beautiful home, and a social calendar that other couples envied. The earliest ones were dated 3 years and 8 months before her death spring of 2018, which meant they began just over 4 years into my marriage. Just after Dominic had started traveling more, just after he had stopped asking about my cases. I read slowly, then faster. Then I had to stop and start over because my brain refused to process what my eyes were taking in. It did not begin as what I feared. There was no romantic language, no intimacy, nothing that looked like an affair. What it looked like, what it was a recruitment. A slow, methodical, calculated recruitment of my sister by my husband. I worked long hours. Dominic traveled for work frequently, sometimes 2 weeks out of every month. I told myself that was just the price of building something real, that the distance was temporary, that we were investing in our future. The early messages were friendly. Dominic checking in on her design work offering to connect her with clients, asking about her apartment, asking if she needed anything. Attentive in exactly the way he had been attentive to me in the beginning. I recognized the pattern because I had lived inside it. By message thread 3, he was asking her about our father's estate, specifically about a property holding company my father had structured before he died, a small LLC that held 2 commercial properties in Southwest Atlanta, left jointly to me and Simone, managed by an estate attorney named Philip Reese. Dominic was asking Simone questions about that LLC. Detailed questions. The kind of questions you ask when you want to understand something's value and its vulnerabilities. Simone's responses were short. My best friend during those years outside of Simone was Marcus Webb. We had started at Wells and Harmon the same year, two forensic accountants who bonded over bad conference room coffee and the shared experience of explaining to clients why their business partners had been stealing from them for years. Careful. She said she didn't know much about the business details, that Camille handled all of that. Then the tone shifted. By 2019, Dominic was no longer asking. He was telling.
I know about the refinancing Philip did without full board approval. I have documentation. If that becomes public, it affects the LLC, which affects Camille's inheritance, which affects everything she's built. You don't want that for her. So let's keep talking.
Marcus was 40 years old, never married sharp as anyone I'd ever met professionally, and one of the genuinely good people I have known in my life. He would become important later. Very important.
What do you want from me?
Not a question. A statement of exhausted resignation from a woman who already understood she was caught. What he wanted was information. Ongoing detailed information about our family's finances, our mother's accounts, the estate holdings, anything Simone could access or observe. He wanted eyes inside the family that I would never suspect. And he had chosen my sister because she was close enough to see everything and because he had found something to hold over her head. He had been blackmailing my sister for 3 years. 3 years of Simone fielding his messages. 3 years of her feeding him just enough to keep him satisfied, while clearly from the record of her responses, trying to find a way out. Now Dominic. 3 years of carrying this alone because he had told her explicitly in a message dated June 2020.
If you tell Camille, I'll make sure she finds out about your involvement. How do you think she'll feel knowing her little sister was working against her? You'll lose her either way. Only difference is whether you lose her before or after I take what I came for.
I had to stop reading. I put the laptop on the passenger seat and pressed my hands flat against my thighs and breathed. The parking garage was dim around me, concrete pillars and yellow lighting a place with no beauty in it whatsoever, and I sat in it and I tried to locate myself inside my own body. He had used the threat of losing me to keep Simone silent. He had made her believe that telling the truth would destroy our relationship. Here is what I need you to understand about my husband, because if I don't explain this carefully, you will wonder how I didn't see it sooner. And I need you to understand that the most dangerous liars are not the ones who seem suspicious. They're the ones who seem safe. He had turned her love for me into a weapon against her. The truth didn't just hurt. It gutted me. Like someone reached inside my chest and ripped out everything I thought was real, and then kept pulling deeper until they found the part I had protected most carefully. The part that was just me and Simone, and they ripped that out too. I picked up the laptop again. I kept reading. In the last 6 months of her life, something changed in Simone's messages. The resignation disappeared. In its place was something deliberate and quiet and brave. She started asking Dominic questions instead of just answering his. Dominic never raised his voice. He never broke a promise he made in public. He showed up to every work event of mine, every family dinner, every neighborhood gathering, and he was charming every single time. She started noting details, dates, amounts. He referenced names of accounts he mentioned. She was building a record. She was collecting evidence the same way I collect evidence, methodically and without announcing herself. And she was doing it for me. The second to last message thread ended with Dominic writing,
You're getting sloppy. Be careful, Simone. I'm not the kind of man who tolerates loose ends.
Loose ends. My sister. He remembered the names of my colleagues' children. He brought wine to dinner parties. He held doors and pulled out chairs and said, "Yes, ma'am," to elderly women at church. He called my sister a loose end. And the last message sent from Simone to Dominic on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks before she died at 11:42 at night.
I have everything. The accounts, the transfers, the conversation logs going back to 2018. All of it. Meet me this week or I go directly to Camille. Your choice.
I sat with that message for a long time. Then I opened the audio file. 47 seconds. He was by every visible measure a good husband. Simone's voice, and I had to press my fist against my mouth when I heard it because I had not heard her voice in 18 months, and it hit me like a physical force. Simone's voice recorded in what sounded like a car slightly muffled. She was speaking quickly like someone who had limited time.
This is Simone Carter recording this on March 29th. If something happens to me, this drive has everything. Dominic Okafor has been using me to gather financial information on my sister Camille and her family's estate. He threatened me to keep quiet. I've been collecting proof for the last 4 months. I'm meeting him this weekend. Camille, if you're hearing this, I love you.
But there was one small thing that I noticed and filed away without understanding its weight. Whenever I mentioned Simone's name, Dominic would shift the conversation within 30 seconds.
I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared of losing you, but I couldn't let him take everything from you. So I'm going to stop him. I love you, Chill.
The recording ended. I don't know how long I sat in that parking garage. Long enough for the motion sensor lights above me to cycle off, leaving me in near darkness with my sister's voice still in my ears. And then out of the darkness, a thought arrived with the precision of a surgical instrument, not emotional, just clear and cold and certain. Simone had recorded that audio on March 29th, but when I lifted it, the phone unlocked. Not rudely, not obviously. Just a small pivot, a redirect, a new topic introduced so smoothly that I'd find myself 3 minutes into something else before I realized we'd moved on. She had sent that final text 3 weeks before her death. She had told Dominic she had everything and was coming to Camille. She died on a Tuesday morning in April, 3 weeks after that message. I sat in that parking lot for 2 full hours, and then a thought hit me so hard I stopped crying completely. Simone said she had everything. This drive was 1 copy. Where was the rest? And why did she die exactly 3 weeks after she threatened to expose him? I thought he felt awkward about how close Simone and I were. Some husbands feel that way about sisters. I drove home that night on autopilot. I remember the lights of Peachtree Road blurring past me, the radio playing something I didn't hear, my hands on the wheel doing what hands do when the rest of you has gone somewhere else entirely. I parked in the driveway. I sat for 3 minutes. I composed my face. Then I walked inside, hung up my coat, and told Dominic I was tired and was going straight to bed. He looked up from his laptop and said,
You okay? You look pale.
Long day. Dominic used to say Simone was the most interesting person he'd ever met. I said, Nothing a good night's sleep won't fix. He nodded and went back to his screen. I lay in the dark beside him for 4 hours without sleeping. I listened to him breathe. I listened to him shift once, settle, go still. I listened to the refrigerator hum downstairs and a car pass outside and the house make its ordinary nighttime sounds. And I thought about Simone. Every version of her I had ever known, the 4-year-old who invented a nickname for me that made no sense, the teenager who stayed up all night with me when our parents' marriage was falling apart, the woman who stood in Piedmont Park on a cold March afternoon and tried to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. She had been carrying this alone for 3 years to protect me. At the time, I took that as a compliment. And in the end, she had decided that protecting me meant stopping him, even if it cost her. I thought about what that decision must have felt like, to be that scared and that brave at the same time. Somewhere around 3 a.m, something inside me went very quiet. Not sad quiet, not broken quiet, the other kind. The kind that comes after every feeling has been felt and processed and set aside, and what remains is just clarity. Pure, cold, functional clarity. It took me 11 months after her death to understand what he really meant. I was a forensic accountant. I had spent 15 years finding what people tried to hide. I had untangled fraud schemes that spanned multiple countries. I had reconstructed financial histories from nothing but fragments and inconsistencies. I had walked into depositions and courtrooms and presented evidence that dismantled the careful constructions of people who believed they were untouchable. I had been doing this for strangers. It was time to do it for Simone. The next morning, I called Marcus from my car parked 2 blocks from our house engine running. He picked up on the second ring. I didn't give him a preamble. There is a version of my marriage that was real. I need you to know that. Because if I pretend it was all performance from the very beginning, then I erase the part of myself that loved him genuinely, and that woman deserves to be acknowledged. not buried. I said, I need you to run a full financial trace on Dominic. Personal accounts, business accounts, any LLCs registered in Georgia, Delaware, or Wyoming in the last 7 years. Any entity where his name appears as registered agent officer or beneficial owner. And I need you to look for outbound transfers, anything systematic, anything that could represent asset movement out of a joint account. Silence for a beat.
You found something on the drive.
I said, I found everything. He's been building an exit. In the early years, Dominic and I had something that felt solid. Sunday mornings were ours. He would make breakfast while I read the paper, real printed newspaper. Because my father always had one on the table, and old habits don't die easy. We'd sit at the kitchen island for 2 hours sometimes just talking about nothing and everything. I need to know where the money went.
Give me 72 hours.
Thank you, I said.
Camille,
His voice was careful.
are you safe right now?
I thought about Simone's last message, about the phrase loose ends, about the fact that my husband was a man who identified problems and eliminated them with the kind of patience that looked from the outside like nothing at all. His work trips my cases what we wanted to do when we finally took that trip to the Amalfi Coast. We kept planning and never booking. Those mornings felt like the truest version of us. I'm careful, I said. That's enough for now. Marcus came back in 60 hours, not 72. What he found was not surprising to me as a professional. As a wife, it was annihilating. Over the course of 3 years, beginning in 2020, the same year he had explicitly threatened Simone into silence, Dominic had been systematically transferring money from our joint accounts into a single-member LLC registered in Wyoming called Ashton Meridian Consulting Group. The name was close enough to his employer's name to look like a legitimate business expense if anyone glanced at it casually. The transfers were small individually between $800 and $3,200, irregular in timing, irregular in amount designed to stay below the threshold that triggers automatic financial review flags. Total transferred over 3 years, $287,000. He was generous in ways that felt genuine, not showy generous, not look at me generous, but the quiet kind. He had also opened an offshore account in the Cayman Islands 18 months prior, right around the time Simone died, through a financial services firm that specialized in, as Marcus put it with careful neutrality, asset privacy structures. The balance in that account, as best as Marcus could reconstruct from the paper trail, was somewhere north of $400,000. Combined with the Wyoming LLC, Dominic had quietly moved nearly $700,000 into structures that I had no legal access to and no knowledge of. And Marcus found one more thing. A documented draft not yet executed prepared by a real estate attorney in Buckhead. A quit-claim deed that would transfer my 50% ownership of the 2 commercial properties I had inherited from my father into a joint trust. A trust structured so that in the event of dissolution, the assets would be liquidated and proceeds distributed to Ashton Meridian Consulting Group. He had been planning to have me sign away my inheritance. He just hadn't gotten me to the table yet. That was what the 11 years were for. When my car needed new brakes and I was in the middle of a case that had me working until midnight every night, I came home one evening and my car had been serviced, detailed, and returned to the driveway with a full tank of gas. That was what the Sunday morning breakfasts were for, and the tulips and the remembered birthdays and the careful, patient charm. He had been waiting for the right moment to convert 11 years of trust into a signature on a piece of paper. I sat with Marcus's report for one evening. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to attorney Diana Kwan, whose name I knew from 3 professional referrals over the years, a divorce and family law specialist in Buckhead with a reputation for being particularly effective in cases involving hidden assets. Her assistant gave me an appointment for the following Tuesday. The second call was to a private investigator named Raymond Hughes, former Atlanta PD detective, now working independent cases. His specialty, according to his firm's website, was accident reconstruction and civil investigation. I told him I needed to discuss a traffic fatality from April 2022. He said he could see me Thursday. Not because of my face. No announcement, just done. That was the Dominic I married. After I made those calls, I went home. I made dinner Dominic's favorite jerk chicken with rice and peas, a recipe his mother had given me in the second year of our marriage. I set the table. I lit a candle. When he walked in the door and smiled at the smell of the food, I smiled back.
What's the occasion?
He asked, loosening his tie. No occasion, I said. I just felt like doing something nice. And he was good with Simone, or so I believed. He remembered her birthday every year without me reminding him. He kissed my cheek.
That's my girl.
I handed him a glass of wine and went back to the stove. I kept my back to him so he couldn't see my face. He kissed me goodnight later that evening and said,
I love you, Camille.
His voice was warm, practiced, perfect. And I said, when she was going through a difficult period with a client who hadn't paid her for a large design project, Dominic quietly connected her with an attorney friend who helped her recover the money. I love you too. That was the last lie I ever told him. Everything after that was strategy. Diana Kwan's office was on the 14th floor of a building on West Peachtree Street with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Midtown Atlanta. She was 50 years old Korean-American with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses she wore, pushed up on her forehead until she needed them. She had a stillness about her that I recognized immediately, the stillness of someone who had heard every version of every terrible story and had learned to hold space for all of them without being moved off-center. She listened to everything. She did not wince. She did not offer sympathy prematurely. She took notes on a yellow legal pad in handwriting so small I couldn't read it from across the desk. Simone thanked him genuinely that time. She hugged him. When I finished, she set her pen down and looked at me directly.
The Wyoming LLC and the Cayman account are our primary leverage. Hidden assets in a divorce proceeding in Georgia and equitable distribution state are treated very seriously by the courts. If we can demonstrate systematic concealment, we're not just talking about an even split. We're talking about the judge having discretion to award a disproportionate share to the non-concealing party. That would be you.
What about the quitclaim deed? I asked.
So has he presented it to you yet?
No. I remember thinking finally she's warming up to him. It was a draft. He hasn't moved on it.
Then he's waiting for the right moment. She looked at me steadily. We need to move before he creates that moment.
We spent 90 minutes building the framework of the filing. Diana was methodical and precise, and I liked her enormously. Before I left, she said one more thing.
Ms. Okafor, is there anything beyond the financial picture that I should know about? Anything that might complicate or expand the scope of what we're dealing with, El Palzio?
What I did not know, what I could not have known then, was what was happening beneath the surface of every interaction between my husband and my sister. I thought about Raymond Hughes, about the appointment I had in 2 days, about Simone's audio recording her voice in the parking garage. March 29th. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Possibly, I said. I'll know more by Thursday. Raymond Hughes operated out of a small office in Decatur above a dry cleaning business, which I found oddly reassuring. No glass towers, no marble lobbies, just a man with a filing system and 30 years of knowing how to look at things other people had stopped looking at. But I am getting to that. I promise I am getting to that. He was 50 years old, broad-shouldered, with reading glasses on a cord around his neck, and the measured speech of someone who understood the weight of words in professional contexts. He had worked traffic fatalities for 11 years with Atlanta PD before going private. I gave him the case number from Simone's accident report. I gave him the date, the location, the official finding. I gave him nothing else I wanted his read before I contaminated it with mine. He said he'd be in touch within 2 weeks. The 2 weeks that followed were the most disciplined performance of my life. Every morning I woke up beside Dominic and I was his wife. I was present, warm, consistent. I asked about his work. For now, the cracks. I laughed at his stories. I went to 2 social dinners with his colleagues and I was charming and appropriate and everything he needed me to be in public. At the second dinner at a restaurant in Virginia Highland, 12 people around a long table, Dominic told a story about a deal he'd closed that week. And at the punchline, he looked down the table at me and said loud enough for everyone to hear,
I built everything we have honestly. This woman could not survive 1 week without the structure I provide.
He was smiling when he said it, laughing almost. A few people chuckled. Someone said power couple and raised a glass. The first one appeared in the summer of 2019, 8 years into our marriage. I raised mine back. I smiled at him across the table with every warm thing I could manufacture on my face. He had no idea what was coming. Not one idea. Meanwhile, Marcus had continued pulling threads. He found that Dominic had been having conversations with a commercial real estate broker about liquidating one of the Southwest Atlanta properties, my father's property, without my knowledge or involvement. The broker had sent Dominic a preliminary valuation 3 months prior. Dominic had responded with interest. The property was valued at $1.2 million. He was not waiting much longer. Dominic had been traveling more than usual 3 weeks in Houston, then 2 weeks in Dallas back to back. He was close to making his move. Diana filed the emergency asset freeze petition on a Wednesday morning, a legal instrument that once granted by a judge would lock every joint account, every identified LLC, and flag the Cayman account through international banking cooperation channels before Dominic could touch any of it. The petition was granted by Thursday afternoon. Dominic did not know. The freeze was in place but not yet served. Diana held the service timing deliberately. She wanted it delivered simultaneously with the divorce petition at a moment of our choosing, not his. That moment was our anniversary dinner, November 14th, 11 years. Dominic had planned it himself, a private dining room at Nikolai's Roof, one of Atlanta's finest restaurants 14 floors up with a view of the city, because of my sisters. When he came home, something was different. He had invited 8 couples, close friends, family. He had told me it was going to be a celebration. What he had not told me, what Marcus uncovered 4 days before the dinner, was that Dominic had arranged for a notary public to be present at the dinner, introduced as a friend of a friend. He had the quitclaim deed prepared in final form. He had planned in front of our friends and family to present it to me as part of a toast, framed as a romantic gesture, a joint investment in our future together, and have me sign it in a moment of public warmth and trust, witnessed and notarized, before I had time to read it carefully. He was going to take my father's legacy from me at our anniversary dinner. He had planned this for years. He had been patient for years. He had endured 11 years of Sunday mornings and tulips, and I love yous for this moment. When Marcus told me, I sat at my desk for a long time without speaking. Not dramatically different. Not movie different, where the husband walks in cold and distant, and the wife immediately knows. Then I called Diana. I called Raymond. I made arrangements. Raymond had called me 2 days prior with his preliminary findings significant enough that he had contacted a former colleague still active in Atlanta PD's Criminal Investigation Division, enough to open a formal inquiry, enough to have 2 officers present at a location of our choosing on the evening of November 14th. That evening, the night before the anniversary dinner, Dominic came home relaxed and easy, the way a man looks when he believes everything is going according to plan. He poured himself a bourbon. He put music on. He came up behind me at the kitchen counter and wrapped his arms around me and said, it was subtler than that.
Tomorrow night, baby. 11 years. Can you believe it?
I can't, I said honestly. He laughed and kissed my temple.
We've built something real, Camille. Not everybody gets that.
I turned around and looked at him, really looked at him for what I knew would be one of the last times. I studied his face the way I study a financial document I'm about to present as evidence. He stopped asking about my cases, taking inventory, making sure I had missed nothing. I smiled at him and said nothing. Let him enjoy his last few hours of feeling powerful. Our anniversary dinner was in less than 24 hours. He thought he was going to walk away with everything. I had other plans, and so did Simone from beyond the grave. Nikolai's Roof on a November evening is one of the most beautiful places in Atlanta. 14 floors up the city, spreads out beneath you in every direction, a grid of lights that looks from that height like something orderly and intentional. That might sound small, but for 8 years, Dominic had been genuinely curious about my work. Like everything below has been arranged according to a plan. I thought about that as the elevator doors opened and I stepped out in a black dress I had bought specifically for this evening. Something about the irony of it that Dominic had chosen this place, this height, this view for the night. He planned to take everything from me. He had wanted the setting to feel significant. He had no idea how significant it was about to become. He was already there when I arrived, standing near the entrance to the private dining room talking to another couple. He turned when he heard my heels on the floor, and his face did the thing it always did when he saw me dressed up, a genuine appreciation that I now understood had nothing to do with love and everything to do with the way I reflected on him in public. He crossed to me, kissed my cheek, took my hand.
You look incredible,
he said. He liked hearing the puzzle-solving parts, how I'd find a discrepancy in a ledger that led to a whole hidden network of transactions. Thank you, I said. So do you. He was wearing the charcoal suit I had always liked on him and the burgundy tie I had given him for his birthday 3 years ago. He looked by every visible measure like a man celebrating 11 years of a good marriage. He was relaxed, confident. He had the easy warmth of someone who knows exactly how the evening is going to go. The private dining room held 26 people, our 8 couples, plus Yvette Dominic's mother, who had driven up from Macon. She hugged me at the door and held my face in her hands the way she always did. He'd ask follow-up questions. He remembered details from cases I'd mentioned months before. I looked at her and felt something complicated move through me, because she had known. Not everything, not the depth of it, but enough. She had known her son was not what he presented himself to be, and she had chosen silence. I held her gaze for a moment longer than usual. She looked away first. Dinner was served. That summer he stopped. Wine was poured. The room was warm with conversation and candlelight and the specific ease of people who have known each other long enough to be comfortable. Dominic was at the center of it the way he always was in rooms like this, holding court, making people laugh, filling the space with his presence. I watched him and I thought, this is the last time you will ever be this man. Dessert had just been cleared when Dominic stood up. He picked up his glass and waited for the room to quiet, which it did immediately because Dominic had always commanded rooms effortlessly. He looked around the table with an expression of genuine warmth. And I knew in that moment that even now, even on the edge of everything he believed he was going to win, I'd start telling him about something at work and his eyes would drift to his phone.
11 years. 11 years with the most remarkable woman I have ever known.
He looked at me. The room murmured appreciatively.
Camille, you have been my partner, my foundation, my home. And tonight I want to make a toast to the next chapter.
He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a folded document, setting it on the table in front of him with the casual ease of a man who had rehearsed this gesture.
I've been working on something, an investment in our future, together a joint trust that consolidates everything we've built. A formality, really.
When I pointed it out once gently, he said he was just tired from all the travel.
But I want to do it here tonight in front of the people who love us.
He smiled at me across the table.
Baby, will you sign with me? Right here, right now. So everyone can witness us choose each other one more time.
The room made a soft sound of collective warmth. Someone said beautiful. Someone else started to applaud. Dominic was smiling at me with the full force of 11 years of practiced love. I let the moment breathe for exactly 3 seconds. My sister Simone, who had been gone for 18 months. I believed him. Then I stood up. Actually, Dominic, I said, and my voice came out level and clear and completely calm. I have something for you first. I reached into my evening bag and placed a manila envelope on the table. Thick, sealed.
Diana Kwan stepped through the door of the private dining room.
Behind her, 2 Atlanta police officers in plain clothes took positions near the entrance. The second crack came 4 months later in October, and behind them Raymond Hughes, holding a laptop. The room went very still. Dominic looked at Diana, then at the officers, then back at me, and I watched. I watched with my own eyes as the understanding moved across his face in slow motion, like weather changing over a landscape.
Diana crossed to the table and placed a second document in front of Dominic. Mr. Okafor, you are being served with a petition for dissolution of marriage and an emergency order freezing all joint and individual assets pending investigation of concealed financial holdings.
I was reorganizing our home office. We shared at his desk on one side, mine on the other, and I was clearing out an old drawer of his to make room for some files,
including Ashton Meridian Consulting Group registered in Wyoming, and an offshore account at First Cayman Private Bank. She set down a third document. You are also being notified that a criminal investigation has been opened by Atlanta PD into the circumstances surrounding the death of Simone Renee Carter on April 19th, 2022.
The silence in the room was absolute. Raymond opened his laptop and turned it to face the table. On the screen was a still image from a parking lot security camera. Clear, well lit. Time stamped 10:47 p.m. on April 18th, 2022. Underneath a stack of business cards and an old passport, I found a small jewelry box. The night before Simone's car went off Moreland Avenue. In the image, a car was parked beside Simone's Honda Civic in the lot of the Kroger on Flat Shoals Avenue. The car was a dark blue Mercedes E-Class, Dominic's car, and standing beside Simone's driver's side door. Face partially turned but identifiable. Identifiable to everyone in that room who knew him was Dominic. He was wearing the burgundy tie, the same tie he was wearing right now. Inside was a delicate gold ring with a tiny emerald chip, not my style, not something Dominic had ever discussed with me, not anything I recognized. I had noticed it when he crossed the room to kiss my cheek. I had said nothing. I had let him put it on for his victory dinner. The color drained from his face so completely and so fast that the man beside him actually reached out a hand thinking he was about to faint. Dominic's hand, the hand holding his wine glass, began to tremble. Not slightly, visibly. The glass rattled against the table when he set it down, and then his fingers couldn't seem to let go of it, just gripped the stem while his knuckles went white. When Dominic came home that evening, I showed it to him. Sweat appeared at his temples. I watched it happen. I had spent 11 years watching his face perform emotions. This was the first time I had ever seen a real one. His voice when he tried to speak came out broken in the middle.
That's not, I wasn't.
He stopped. He looked at me. I looked back at him across 11 years of Sunday mornings and tulips and careful, patient, deliberate lies. I looked at him with every feeling I had processed in that parking garage and set aside. I wasn't accusatory, I was genuinely curious. And I said quietly enough that only he could hear. You said I never thought to look at my own house. You were right. But I looked Dominic, and I found everything. Just like Simone did. His knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table. Yvette in the corner pressed both hands over her mouth. She did not go to her son.
Oh, that's yours, baby.
She sat completely still, and the tears that came down her face were the tears of a woman who had known something was wrong for a very long time and had chosen comfort over truth, and was now watching what that choice had cost. Dominic turned to me one last time. His voice was barely functional.
Camille, please. I can explain. Just give me a chance to explain. I'll give everything back.
He barely missed a beat.
Everything. Just don't do this here. Please.
I picked up my evening bag from the back of my chair. I straightened my dress. I looked at him one final time. This man I had loved. This man who had never loved me. This man who had taken my sister and my years and my trust, and had been patient enough about it to make it look like devotion.
I was having it resized. It was your grandmother's. Remember, I took it in months ago and forgot to give it back to you.
You're not sorry, Dominic, I said. You're just sorry Simone couldn't stay quiet. And you're sorry I found her drive. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard one of the officers begin to speak, the formal language of rights being read, the sound of a man's constructed world collapsing into official record. I did not turn around. I walked through the door and into the elevator. I stood there in the dark in my own bedroom holding a phone that just recognized a dead woman's face. And then I made the worst, or maybe the best decision of my life. I opened his messages. He smiled, took it from me, put it in his jacket pocket. and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed. I walked out of that restaurant into the November night air. The city was lit up all around me, 14 floors below where I had just been. And for the first time in 11 years, I felt like I could breathe. I felt like the air itself was different, lighter, cleaner. Like something that had been pressing down on my chest for longer than I had known had finally completely lifted.
I'll get it finished properly. The stone needs to be tightened anyway.
And more than that, I felt Simone, right there with me, close as breath, warm as the memory of her laugh. Like she had been waiting for this moment too. Like she finally knew she could rest. The morning after the anniversary dinner, I woke up in a hotel room in Midtown Atlanta, a room I had booked 3 weeks in advance, paid for with a personal account Dominic had no knowledge of. Packed for with a single bag, I had moved to my office 2 days prior. I had planned this exit the same way I plan every investigation methodically without sentiment, one step at a time. I lay in the unfamiliar bed and looked at the ceiling and waited for the grief to arrive. It came. Of course it came. Not for Dominic, not exactly, or not only. It came for the version of my life I had believed in. For the Sunday mornings that had been real to me, even when they were performance for him. For 11 years of choosing to trust someone who had been counting on that trust, like a financial instrument. I did not own a ring that had belonged to my grandmother. My grandmother's jewelry had gone to my mother when she passed, and none of it had ever come to me. The grief for all of that was real, and I let it move through me without trying to redirect it or reframe it or make it useful. Some things just hurt, and they are supposed to, and the only way out is through. Then I got up, showered, ordered room service coffee, opened my laptop, and I went to work. The months that followed were not simple. I want to be honest with you about that because the story does not end at the restaurant, and I think it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. The divorce proceedings took 7 months. Dominic, once he had secured a criminal defense attorney because the investigation into Simone's death meant he needed one, fought the asset division with everything he had left. He contested the Wyoming LLC characterization. He challenged the admissibility of the financial transfers as marital waste. He filed a counter-petition claiming that I had engaged in financial misconduct by working with Marcus to access his private records.
Diana Kwan handled every single one of those moves with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen this particular playbook many times before.
The judge, the Honorable Patricia Osei of Fulton County Superior Court, a woman whose courtroom I will be grateful for until my last day, reviewed the full record, the hidden accounts, the systematic transfers, the draft quitclaim deed, Simone's USB drive entered into evidence, the audio recording of my sister's voice played in open court, which caused 3 members of the public gallery to audibly weep. But in that moment, Dominic said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that I second-guessed myself.
Judge Osei awarded me the Buckhead House, my full 50% of my father's commercial properties, a disproportionate share of the liquid assets to account for Dominic's concealment and full recovery of the $287,000 transferred to the Wyoming LLC.
The Cayman account, partially recovered through international cooperation, added another $312,000 to the final judgment. Dominic walked out of that courtroom with his personal clothing, his car, and a debt to me that would take him years to satisfy. On the criminal side, and I want to be precise here because I know you want to know the investigation into Simone's death, remained open at the time the divorce was finalized. Raymond Hughes' reconstruction combined with the parking lot footage and forensic analysis of Simone's brake system was sufficient to sustain the inquiry, but not yet sufficient for a criminal charge. What I was told by the detective assigned to the case was this: they were building it carefully the way you build something meant to hold. I chose to believe that Simone's voice in that courtroom was the beginning of justice, not the end of it. I choose to believe that still. Dominic was terminated from Meridian Global Logistics within 48 hours of the criminal investigation becoming public record. He moved out of Atlanta to where I don't know and I did not ask. The last image I have of him is from the final day of divorce proceedings, sitting at his attorney's table in a suit that looked slightly too big for him now, like he had been diminished inside it. Maybe it was something my mother had given me that I'd forgotten about. His mother was not in the gallery. She had called me 2 months prior, her voice barely holding together, and said, "I am so sorry, Camille. I knew he was not right. I chose to look away. I will have to live with that." I told her I appreciated the call. I meant it, and I also could not give her the absolution she was reaching for. Some things cannot be cleaned up with a phone call, but she had told the truth when it mattered, and that counted for something. 6 months after that final court date, I am sitting in my kitchen in Old Fourth Ward. The apartment is on the second floor of a building on Edgewood Avenue, 1,200 square feet, exposed brick on one wall, windows that face east so the morning light comes in strong and golden and fills the whole room by 8 o'clock. I have a rubber plant on the windowsill that Simone would have loved and probably would have named. I have a kitchen table that fits 2 comfortably and 4 in a pinch, and most Sunday mornings I sit at it alone with my coffee and the light, and I think about nothing in particular and everything eventually. Maybe I was misremembering. It is the first home that has been entirely mine. Every piece of furniture chosen by me, every wall color decided by me, every Sunday morning unperformed and unwitnessed and completely real. I went back to Wells and Harmon. Gerald Harmon called me personally before I even submitted my return paperwork and said, "I owe you an apology. I should have asked you directly instead of letting him shape my perception." I told him I accepted the apology and I wanted my desk back. He laughed. I laughed too. It felt good to laugh about something without calculating its effect. Marcus and I had dinner last month at a restaurant in Ponce City Market. We talked for 3 hours about everything except work. He told me I seemed different. I asked him how. The ring never appeared again. He said lighter, like you put something down. I visit Simone's grave every month. I bring white gardenias because she loved the smell of them and said once that any flower that required you to lean in to fully appreciate it was doing something right. I sit with her for a while. I tell her about my cases, my apartment, the rubber plant she would have named. I tell her about the progress on the investigation. I tell her that I found everything she left for me and that I used every single piece of it. Last time I was there, I leaned forward and said quietly, "You were the bravest person I ever knew, Simone, and the most wrong about one thing. You were never going to lose me. Not ever. Not for anything." The wind moved through the cemetery trees, and I chose to take it as an answer. I've thought a long time about what I want to say to you before I finish this story. I never asked about it again, because I know some of you are listening not just as an audience, but as someone who recognizes something. Maybe it is a feeling you have been dismissing. Maybe it is a question you have been afraid to ask. Maybe it is a USB drive you have not yet let yourself look at, metaphorically speaking. Here is what I know to be true. The most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in the language of love. They are dangerous precisely because love makes us want to believe them, and because believing them feels for a while like faith, like loyalty, like being a good partner. I was a forensic accountant who found hidden fraud for a living, and I did not see it in my own house for 11 years. That is not stupidity. That is what happens when trust is weaponized by someone patient enough to wield it carefully. And I filed that moment in the back of my mind under things that felt strange but probably aren't. The other thing I know is this: my sister tried to protect me even when she was afraid. She collected evidence in secret alone in the margins of her own danger because she loved me more than she feared him. She could not deliver it herself, but she left it where I could find it. She trusted that if something happened to her, I would look. She trusted that I was capable of what came next. She was right. I am 38 years old. I am a forensic accountant in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a sister who kept her promise 7 years late. And I am living proof that the truth does not expire. It waits. It waits in a hidden drive, in a favorite book, in a parking lot camera, in the careful record of a woman who refused to let the wrong person win. That drawer in my memory would get very full over the next 2 years. My name is Camille Renee Okafor. I am 38 years old. And I am not what was done to me. I am what I chose to become when I finally decided to look at my own house. If you are in a house that needs looking at, look. You already have everything you need to find the truth. You always did. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, drop a comment and tell me what stayed with you. Tell me if you have been carrying something like this, or if you know someone who has. Your words matter here. If you are new to this channel, subscribe and stay. There are more stories here, and every single one of them is about women who found their way back to themselves. That is the only kind of story worth telling.